At a private board retreat, my father-in-law sneered, "There's always a need for good secretaries in this world." Everyone laughed. I stayed silent for 16 years, then engineered a series of mergers that cut his business interests out entirely. His family name was erased from endowments, his heirs were forced into bankruptcy, and no one invited his descendants to future board meetings. His branch of the family is now referred to as those people who used to matter once. We were at this exclusive board retreat in the Berkshires, one of those old New England estates that only certain people get invited to, the kind with white stone lions out front and doors so heavy you need both hands to pull them open. Everything smelled like money and old wood. It was the kind of place where people pretend they're talking about investments, but what they're really doing is deciding who gets to matter in the next decade. I was 28 back then. I had just married into the family. I wasn't one of them. Not by blood. Not by money. Not by name. I came from Syracuse. My dad owned a small car repair shop off Route 5. My mom worked at a supermarket, cash register 3. I paid for college through a mix of scholarships and 3 jobs. I was the first in my family to get a degree. I earned a spot at a mid-level financial firm in Boston by doing all the grunt work nobody else wanted. I got good at it. Really good. That's where I met Andrew. He was charming, decent-looking, and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about rent. We got married a year later. I thought it was a partnership. I thought I'd be accepted eventually. I was wrong. The retreat was the first time I was invited into the real inner circle, the kind of private gathering where decisions get made behind doors no one else can see. They were all there. Douglas, my father-in-law, was at the center of it all. He sat like a king in an oversized leather chair, wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my first car. Everyone waited for him to speak. That night after dinner, they poured the bourbon. One of the Rothmans brought out cigars. It was a men's circle, but I was allowed in. Just to sit. Just to smile. Just to be looked at. I was quiet. Listening. Taking notes in my head. The conversation turned to succession, mergers, new tech funds, and university boards. They were moving pieces on a chessboard that affected thousands of people, and they talked about it like they were picking out wallpaper. Then Douglas turned to me. He took a long sip of his drink, let the silence grow, then said with a smug grin, "There's always a need for good secretaries in this world." The room exploded. Laughter, real deep mocking laughter. Not the kind that comes from a joke. The kind that's meant to put someone in their place. Even Andrew smiled. I didn't react. I didn't say a word. I just smiled like it didn't bother me. But it did. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there in bed next to Andrew, wide awake, staring at the ceiling while he snored. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. I decided I wasn't going to just survive this life. I was going to win. Over the next few years, I kept my head down. That's what they thought anyway. Andrew and I moved into a brownstone in Cambridge. I kept working at the firm, but I shifted into private equity. Quietly, I started learning everything I could about mid-size family-owned companies, especially ones struggling with succession plans. The kind of companies that men like Douglas used to rescue, and then gut for parts. I studied his moves. I listened during family dinners. I watched how the family trust worked, where the influence was stored. His legacy was spread across 5 companies, 3 private university boards, and 2 hospitals. His name was on more buildings than I could count. I started building my own network carefully, deliberately. I didn't flash money. I didn't use the family name. I used my maiden name in business, a name no one in those circles paid attention to. That was my shield. By year 6, I had my own firm. Quiet partnerships, faceless shell entities, smart people who owed me favors. I never told Andrew. I didn't need to. He was too busy trying to impress his father. That's when the cracks in our marriage began to show. He started getting careless. Cheating with a woman from his gym. Then another one from a gallery opening. I found emails. I kept copies. I stayed quiet. The longer I stayed, the more I learned. Year 8, I saw an opportunity. One of Douglas's smaller subsidiaries, an underperforming logistics company, was being shopped quietly. I used a proxy firm to acquire it. He never saw my name. Didn't know I was behind it. From there I took 2 more. One by one, through partnerships, shell acquisitions, and quiet takeovers, I started slicing pieces off his empire. Not enough to draw attention. Just enough to weaken the foundation. In year 10, I filed for divorce. I had a folder of Andrew's affairs, financial records, and hidden accounts. I didn't ask for much. Just the Cambridge property and a quiet split. He didn't want a public scandal, so he agreed. That was when I went for the kill. I engineered a merger between 3 companies, 2 of which used to sit under Douglas's portfolio. I sold them off strategically, each deal orchestrated to dry up one of his main revenue streams. He tried to intervene. He brought in lawyers. But the companies weren't in his name anymore. They'd been restructured, stripped of his control. His influence started to shrink. First, from the university board, his seat was reassigned after they restructured their endowment. One of my firms had quietly become the second largest donor. Then came the hospitals. A board vote removed his name from the pediatric wing. My firm offered a new endowment under a different name. He couldn't match it. By year 15, he was fighting lawsuits, hemorrhaging influence, and burning bridges. His reputation faded, then disappeared. His family started feeling it too. One by one, his kids' trust funds dried up. Andrew had to sell the house in Back Bay. His sister's family lost their summer place on the vineyard. The worst was when his youngest son, Joel, couldn't secure a board seat at the same hedge fund his grandfather had founded. The chair looked him dead in the eye and said, "We don't deal with that branch of the family anymore." I watched from a distance as Douglas tried to salvage what was left. His health began to fail. His kids fought over scraps. And when he finally tried to push back into the world he once ruled, he found that the doors didn't open anymore. The last time I saw him was at a conference in Manhattan. He walked past me in the lobby, older, slower, smaller somehow. He looked at me, and I saw the moment it clicked. He finally knew. I didn't expect what came next. After that Manhattan conference, I figured Douglas would just fade away. He had lost his grip. The people who used to bow to him were now cozying up to newer, quieter power. My kind of power. But then something changed. A rumor started going around, nothing loud, just whispers among people who mattered. Someone was building a counterplay. Old capital was moving. Silent bids were being made on 2 of my partner firms. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then one of my closest confidants, a managing partner at a PE firm I had worked with for years, took a sabbatical, with no warning. The move smelled like Douglas, or someone acting on his behalf. I checked the paper trail, found a Cayman-based entity that had started scooping up shares in companies I controlled from the edges. Nothing illegal but surgical. Careful. This was someone who had learned from my playbook. For the first time in years, I felt heat on my neck. Then came the call. It was Andrew. We hadn't spoken in nearly 4 years. He sounded off. Drunk maybe. Or just broken. "I didn't know," he said, almost whispering. "I didn't know he'd go that far." "What did he do?" I asked. There was a pause. "He liquidated the last family trust. Put it all into one shell fund. He's trying to buy everything back, under a different name." That's when I realized the desperation. Douglas wasn't trying to regain his legacy. He was trying to erase me from the game entirely. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about erasing the threat I had become. But he had made one mistake. In a move to hide ownership of the shell fund, he had partnered with a brokerage firm that had been under SEC investigation 2 years ago. I had a friend there. Someone I helped when she was being iced out by her male partners. She owed me. One call and I had access to everything. The fund structure. The board. The silent partners. And Douglas using a false name. But the fingerprints were unmistakable. I leaked the file to 2 places. 1. A financial watchdog group that lived to tear down rich frauds. 2. The private school where Douglas's grandkids were still enrolled under legacy status. Within weeks, the fund collapsed. SEC opened a probe. The school announced it was reevaluating legacy admissions to promote transparency. I heard through back channels that Douglas had tried to call in favors, but the people he called no longer owed him anything. Worse, some of them owed me. Then the final twist came. Douglas's oldest daughter, Clara, reached out to me. Quietly, carefully. She was done pretending. She had 3 kids to protect. And no future if she kept carrying her father's name. She wanted to help. "I can show you what he's still holding," she said. "But I want out. I want a clean break." I told her to meet me in person. And that meeting changed everything. We met at a quiet cafe in Providence. Neutral ground. I picked it because it was nowhere near Boston or New York, and Clara wouldn't be recognized. She looked tired. Not rich people tired, real tired. Her hands trembled slightly when she took the coffee I ordered for her. She didn't try to make small talk. Just opened her laptop and turned it toward me. "There are still 3 holdings under offshore structures," she said. "They look clean but they're dirty. He's hiding stock under nominee accounts." I scrolled through the files. My eyes stopped on one name, Kinsley Therapeutics. That was my father's heart medication supplier. The one whose price hikes had nearly bankrupted him the year before he died. The one that refused him a generic trial after 40 years of paying into the system. I remembered those bills. Remembered holding my mom while she sobbed over the kitchen table. He'd died with over $60,000 in medical debt. And Douglas was one of the silent backers. I didn't say anything. I just closed the laptop and said, "You've done your part." Clara reached out. "I'm not like him. I want you to know that." I nodded. "I believe you. But I'm not doing this for you." She left. I never saw her again. In the next 4 months, I did what I had been building toward for 16 years. I formed a coalition of small private firms and individual investors who had been pushed out, stepped on, or laughed at by men like Douglas. We bought out Kinsley. Quietly, piece by piece, until we controlled the board. Then I walked into that boardroom in New Jersey. Not as a guest. Not as a secretary. As the new chair. Douglas was still a minority stakeholder through his shell company. He came storming in with 2 lawyers demanding to speak. I let him rant. Let him throw his folder on the table and wave his arms. He tried to warn me about what this meant, how I was destroying a legacy. When he finally stopped, I looked him in the eye. "You remember that retreat in the Berkshires?" I asked. He didn't speak. His jaw clenched. You looked me in the eye and said, "There's always a need for good secretaries." He stared, like he couldn't believe I'd brought it up. Like it hadn't meant anything to him at all. "Well," I said, "I hope you kept that energy. Because you're going to need a new job." Then I handed him the termination letter. His remaining positions had been stripped. His final voting rights revoked. A week later, the news broke. Former Boston magnate ousted in hostile takeover. His face was on the evening news not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale. I didn't smile. Not right away. That came later when I got the call from the university. They were renaming the Douglas Family Center. My firm had outbid him in endowment matching. The new name? My father's. Daniel C. Meyer Center for Applied Business Ethics. My mom cried when she saw the plaque. As for Andrew, he tried to reach out a few months ago. He was broke, divorced again, and bitter. "I don't even get invited to board meetings anymore," he said over voicemail. "They call us those people who used to matter." Once. I deleted the message. I've made mistakes. Staying silent for that long? That was one. Marrying into that family? Another. But I learned. And I waited. And when the moment came, I took everything.